When they told me it was multiple myeloma, I knew I was in for it. Everything you hear about African Americans and cancer didn't help either. But you know something? I didn't let it stop me. I did my research and worked with my doctor to learn about my options. With myeloma, you can't back down. You gotta keep it moving.
Everyone, this is State Senator Sandra Williams. I want to welcome all of you to the Environmental Justice and the Green Economy meeting. What is the connection? Today I have joining me Lonnie Stevenson, who is the International President for the IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Harold Mitchell, who is from the Regenesis community, and Mustafa Santiago Ali from the National Wildlife Federation. What I'd like to do to start out is to ask each panelist to give us a little bit of information about themselves and the organization that they belong to. Lonnie, I'll start with you.
Yes, my name's Lonnie Stevenson, the International President for the IBEW. I'm a journeyman electrician by trade. Started my apprenticeship back in 1975 and had worked with the tools and construction for 15 years. And then I went into, become a rep in my local union and went to work for the International Union. And as of 2015, I became the president of the IBEW. The IBEW represents about 775,000 active and retired members all across the United States and Canada. About 85% of our members, between our utility members and our construction, are directly tied to energy, and in one way or the other, in construction or the utility workers, and so we're very proud of who we represent and what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Lonnie. Harold.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Harold Mitchell, and I represent a nonprofit called Regenesis in Spartanburg, South Carolina. In this project, I grew up surrounded by toxic waste facilities, 2 Superfund sites, 4 brownfield sites, and organized our community to address the environmental impacts, to where we took a $20,000 small grant, leveraged that into $300 million, and became a demonstration project for the Federal Interagency Working Group on Environmental Justice. And I'm happy to be here tonight to be a part of this discussion and all the great work that NBCSL has done in regarding environmental justice and climate justice.
Thank you, Harold. Mustafa, last but not least.
Thank you, Senator. I'm Mustafa Santiago Ali. I'm the Vice President at the National Wildlife Federation, focusing on environmental justice, climate, and community revitalization. And I'm also the CEO and founder of Revitalization Strategies, an organization that's focused on moving our most vulnerable communities from surviving to thriving.
Thank you so much. Listen, I have read each one of your bios, and I know that your bios are much longer than the brief description that you just gave right now. You guys have so much to offer and so much information that you can offer the members of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. So let me just thank you for being with us today and sharing with us the information on environmental justice and a green economy. So I guess my first question is, what exactly does environmental justice and a green economy mean? Where do they meet?
Well, I'll start. It meets in people's lives. It meets in their communities. And sometimes it meets in the hospitals and the clinics that folks find themselves in because of the impacts that have happened. And we should be very clear. You know, the old fossil fuel economy that was needed at one time has played a significant role in the impacts that have happened in communities of color and lower wealth communities and on indigenous lands. And those impacts have been, public health. We know that 100,000 people are dying prematurely from air pollution every year in our country. We know that with the burning of fossil fuels has also caused long-term medical conditions for many folks, liver and kidney diseases, these cancer clusters that we find, lung diseases, and a number of other public health impacts that have been a part of that. And we also know that the fossil fuel economy has not necessarily been beneficial to the folks that we let, the communities that we call our most vulnerable communities, because when we look across the country, in many instances, the folks who come from the communities where many of these facilities are located are not predominantly hired inside of these respective plants and other facilities. So there has been an impact that's happened from that fossil fuel economy. The clean economy gives us a chance to actually address many of those impacts that happened before. It gives us a chance to move into a 21st century economy with a 21st century set of opportunities where justice and equity can be more integrated into a new set of opportunities.
Senator Williams, can I add on to that?
Yes, you can.
I would just add on to the fact that right now we see that the pandemic has pulled the cover back on this and has exposed the consequences to the tens of thousands of toxic waste sites that are located in these vulnerable communities that Mustafa talked about across the country that many of the members of NBCSL represents. So, the pandemic forced us to connect the dots of the social determinants of health while we're observing why the Black and brown communities are testing positive at a higher rate than white communities. And this is something that the doctors are saying, these underlying health conditions that Mustafa talked about is one that we see the high rates of asthma, different forms of cancer, and folks not having medical homes. And this is where we see, these rising numbers to where those kinds of conditions almost like a predator for what we now know as COVID-19.
Thank you guys so much. So I want to pick up on what Mustafa said. So Lonnie, this question is going to you. Right now, across the country, there has been competition, a rift between traditional forms of energy, such as coal, nuclear, gas-fired power plants, and the renewable industry. So tell me how the IBEW fits in here. Listen, all of these companies, the resources, want to continue to exist. We have several bills in Ohio right now where people are really competing. We have some industries losing out who can't compete in the marketplace. And we have some renewable industries, some solar projects who want tax credits and certain things in order for them to really get into the industry. How do you balance the two, especially with your membership? Some are already working in the industry and some want to get into the industry.
Yes, thanks for that question. It is, as we, as we transform the way we're going to produce energy and moving more into the renewables. As you said, as coal is going away, we have a lot of members who work in coal generation. But as the renewables, as we move into renewables, and we work very closely actually with the President-elect Biden and when he was putting together his energy policy, and while we get there, there has to be in the transition period while we're continuing to build out solar, while we're building the wind, how do we transform and, the fossil fuels that's there. Nuclear is another energy. And of course, nuclear's got, some issues as well, but when it comes to climate, it's zero emissions. And so we have to have a reliable base load energy as we're making the transformation, because right now we couldn't run the country on solar and wind alone. And the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow. So there's got to be some type of a reliable base load to pick up with that slack times, even, into the future. And so, when speaking with President-elect Biden and working on his energy plan, we know that these new energy and moving into renewables is going to create thousands, well, actually they say millions of jobs moving into that industry and create new opportunities. And one of the things we have within the IBEW and our structure is we have apprenticeship training facilities all across the United States. In every corner of the country, we have local unions that have training facilities, so we can get people in there as the new technologies come out. We can get up and get the training and bring those folks on to the new energy sources. And so they've got an opportunity for those jobs. Now we also have an initiative within the IBEW, what we call IBEW Strong. And that is really an initiative to make sure that we are being more inclusive, to have more women and people of color in our apprenticeship programs. And we're being very progressive in trying to reach out to those communities, especially in construction, where it's been dominated pretty basically white male in the construction industry. And but we're really working hard, and we're seeing having some great success, especially in some local unions, of having reach out programs to reach out to these kids when they're really even before high school anymore. We got to go to the grade school and middle school when they're learning and teach about, they need to learn about opportunities they could have in the energy, and like I said, renewable energies, that we can help get those kids into our programs, and to get them the training to be the energy providers of the future. So we've got a lot going on with that, and we've been pretty successful with it. And not only with bringing new kids into the industry, we also have been working. We've got some programs where someone that has been previously incarcerated, we have direct entry programs where people can get exposure to what we do in the IBEW, and they can go through some basic training and education actually, and then when they come out, when they get released, they've got opportunities to go to work in our programs as well. And so we're pretty proud of the things we're doing. We got a long ways to go, but we're really have a lot of good programs going all across the country to make sure that we're including some of those people that have been left behind, to be quite honest with you, hadn't had opportunities. So we're working hard to making sure they've got opportunities in the new energy that's coming before us.
Excellent. Well, Lonnie, I want to follow up with you on human capital. As you just said, there are many opportunities that exist, but in some worlds, especially in the minority community, there are not opportunities for Black and brown people to really take advantage of the benefits that labor unions bring to the table. So I want to know what you're doing specifically across the country to address this particular issue. And also, we know that a lot of people in the building trades are nearing or are at retirement, and many have been asked not to retire because you just don't have enough people. Is what you're doing working to help keep your industry going? Or what are some other things that we as state legislators can do to ensure that our economy does not fall apart? I'll give you an example. Right now, there is an energy facility who is the infrastructure is over 100 years old. They don't have the workers trained to take the place of many people who are there right now. The machines and the parts for the machines are no longer made. And so right now you have an empty vessel and you have nobody in line to take their place.
Yeah, and again, it's all in the, in the education process of really getting into the school systems and let them know that, there are opportunities. Now I have, nothing against the children going on and going to college, if they've got the opportunity, but college isn't for everyone. And so it's particularly in the building trades. There are opportunities if, these kids are coming out of school, they get in our program, they're getting paid. They're getting paid to learn. We have a 5-year program to be an electrician, a 3-year program to be a lineman. But they can, they're doing their schoolwork. They go to school, depends on the program where they're at, one day a week, after work, or some of them, they actually have day school. They'll have a day off work and go to school, but they'll have classrooms, usually runs about the same time as a normal school year, start in the fall, go through, the late spring, and then they're off for the summer and then back, but they're earning while they're learning. And the great thing about it, they can, when they graduate at 5 years and they've got that journeyman wireman status, they don't have any debt. They've been earning all along, so they don't, they're not getting out with the college debt to have to repay, and they're on to the opportunity once they become a journeyman. I mean, really, the sky is the limit. Whether You know, whether they may just want to work as a journeyman, go out and work on the job site, maybe become a foreman or general foreman. They may even decide to go into business and become a contractor and get into the contracting side. And so, you know, it really creates a lot of opportunities. But you're right, one of the things right now in construction, overall, most all the trades have been having a shortage of workers. And that's again why, you know, we're trying to encourage the school systems, you know, that you have to be letting these kids know there's job opportunities out there. And so we can fill those voids, you know, as we need the more workers coming into our programs. And but there's a lot of opportunities out there. Of course, construction can sometimes, you know, it's highs and lows, you know, but in my experience, when I was working in construction, there was times like my local, we'd have full employment and we'd have what we call travelers, people working from other areas that could come in and work in our areas. But then when the work got slow where I lived, usually there's somewhere else. If you were willing to travel, you could go. Like I grew up in Illinois on the west side of the state on the Mississippi River, Iowa-Illinois border. If there was work in the Chicago area, only 2.5 hours away, I could go over there and work out of that local union and still provide, you know, for my family. And I did that a few times, had to travel to provide. So, you know, so I was able to keep our health insurance and your pension, and construction is built on the hours you work. So if you don't work, you're not earning, you know, you're going to start losing your health care. You're not going to be building your pension benefits because you're not working. But that gives us the opportunity in the IBEW, once you're a journeyman status, to really go anywhere in the country where there's work. And so I think it's really, we're trying to and do work trying to get into the schools and making sure that these kids know that there's opportunities for them. And like I said, particularly, you know, women, you know, you wouldn't, especially linemen now, you know, we're starting to get more and more women that are linemen, and that's high work and climbing poles and but, you know, and it's still, it's an occupation that's not for everybody. And when I say, you know, I remember doing interviews for linemen. My local, we had linemen in our local, and we'd interview for apprentices, and we'd have somebody and ask, why do you want to be a lineman? And they talked about, I want to have a good quality job to provide for my family. So the next thing you ask for, do you have any problem with heights? You know, because you're climbing, you're doing a lot of work in the air, you're working in bucket trucks, or you may actually be climbing that wood pole, you know. And oh no, I don't have any problem with it. Well, then when they got in the program, we have what we call a boot camp, and they'd go to that boot camp, and as soon as they had to start putting on the hooks and start climbing, they found out real quick that they really had a fear for heights or not. And but that's good. That's what that was all about, because that trade is not for everybody. But the people who are in that trade love it. They love it, you know, and they're hard workers, and they're committed to what they do. So I think there's lots of opportunities, and I think across the you know, with the building trades, other building trades unions are doing a lot of proactive things like we are in the IBEW, trying to reach out to the communities that haven't been a part of our construction trades as well. I've really got to give them all credit. I think they've all got programs going to try to, like I said, to invite, you know, women and people of color to get into their programs. So there's opportunities in construction.
Well, excellent. We are glad that you are reaching out to our communities. We know we need the work, and we know if we work hard enough, we will find the right person. I've been working with the iron workers to try to find people to go into their union, but as soon as I mentioned that you have to go up and you're on a bridge, the first thing they do is say, I don't want that job. It doesn't matter if it's $20, $30, or $40 an hour. So if I was a little younger, I might have done it, but I get it. So Mustafa, let's go back to you. Now, you've been doing a lot of work. So I want to know what factors have exacerbated environmental injustices, and what caps on development can be placed by a green economy to reduce the risk. Now, you talked a little bit about the things that have been in our communities that have contributed to environmental injustice. Can you share a little bit more about what you mean?
Well, folks often ask the question, how did we get here? And I'm very clear about that. Part of it is systemic racism, and that systemic racism that is played out in policy. And that's also played out in where resources go and where they don't go, and the disinvestment in certain communities. And that systemic racism is also played out in redlining and a number of other things that stop folks from having access to capital and stop them from being able to have mobility in where they can live and where their homes are, and also what's being placed next to their homes. So, you know, all of that plays out, and it plays out in examples like the Manchester community in Houston, Texas, a hardworking Latinx community that when you go there and you roll down the windows of your car, they feel like you're breathing in gasoline fumes. There's no reason for anyone in our country to ever have to live in that type of a situation. In that community, if you go in people's front yards or backyards, depending on which direction it's facing, and you reach your arm out as far as you can go, you can reach the piping that exists inside of facilities. You can go over to Port Arthur, Texas, right there on the Gulf Coast as well. You know, was at one time a hardworking middle class African-American community that now has so many petrochemical facilities that as far as the eye can see. Or you can go over to places like Cancer Alley in New Orleans that runs from Baton Rouge to New Orleans, you know, founded by freed slaves. And you see those similar dynamics, but it's not just in the South. You know, you can go to 48217 in the South side of, or Southwest Detroit. You know, when kids open up their windows, they don't see trees, you know, they see facilities, and all the impacts that come from that constant breathing in of emissions. You know, Harold had mentioned before that we have, you know, these crazy asthma rates that are happening in Black and brown communities. You know, we got 24 million folks who have asthma in our country and 7 million kids. You know, that's just one of those things that come out of these sets of situations. And of course, all the water quality stuff that we see going on that puts an additional burden on our public health system, right? Or on our healthcare. And many of the folks who will be watching this, you know, have worked on healthcare coverage. And we know in our country, we got 80 million people who are uninsured and underinsured. One of the reasons you need to have a good union job is because you get good healthcare coverage at the same time. So whether we're talking about the fossil fuel economy or we're talking about the new clean energy economy, we got to make sure that we have union jobs. I should be very transparent. I come out of a union family. My grandfather was a coal miner. My aunts and uncles worked in the coal mines, and my father, you know, he worked in factories. He was an engineer, but he worked in factories. And, you know, so I understand the value of having a good union job that comes with good salaries that give you a chance to do some things. But you asked about the caps. You know, caps come back to policy and decisions that folks are making about where we're going to invest. I believe in a just transition that was shared with you before. And that means that no one has to get left behind when we talk about this new clean economy. And we should call out the fact that the fossil fuel industry have received billions of dollars in tax breaks every year. So when we look at wind and thermal, when we look at solar and tidal, then we know that those are some of the new forms of energy that are out there. So we should be making sure that they have an opportunity to fully compete competitively in this energy economy that's out there. So I say all that to say that when we talk about caps, you know, we are talking about policy, whether on the state level or the federal level, and how in many instances it helps to support those that they see value in and stops those that they don't see value in. And but we have an opportunity. The new clean economy provides so many amazing opportunities that I hope we get a chance to talk about in more depth as we move forward.
Well, why don't we go right into that? Because as we debate legislation about the green economy and the clean economy, we have many individuals who say, I do not want to lose my job. There is no certainty that another job, the green economy, is going to come into my community. If we allow these businesses to go by the wayside because of policy, then my family will be left without a job. So go into it a little bit more. Tell me how you're going to save people who believe that once you take these companies, take these jobs out of their communities, right, they're going to be left with vacant and contaminated lands. And I want Harold to step in too to talk about what they've done with these vacant and contaminated lands in his community.
Well, that's a very fair question, and not enough folks can answer it in a way that actually makes sense. Well, you know, I'm a country boy, so I just believe in real talk and keeping things simple. I don't use a whole lot of big words unless I have to. Okay. You know, it's really quite simple. When folks raise that question, the beauty of being raised in Appalachia is that I watched the coal mines actually the businesses shrink for decades upon decades upon decades. So for those folks, they're still looking for a set of opportunities. And we've had folks that have blocked those opportunities that have been in states like Maryland, and you literally can drive a mile and come into places like West Virginia. You can look backwards and you see the giant windmills that are on the top, and the folks in Maryland are making money off of that, and they've got a cleaner form of energy where the folks in West Virginia don't have those sets of opportunities. So the question is, are the folks in Maryland better than the folks in West Virginia? And of course the answer is no, because they work just as well with their hands and their minds in West Virginia as folks do over there. The other part of the thing is that you've got to make sure that there is a real plan with the resources behind it to make sure that, you know, we have these public-private partnerships and other things to ensure that jobs are going to be in certain areas. And then you make sure that there's the right tax structures. Then we stop having these basic conversations around just wind and solar as the future of a clean economy system. Our brother here raised earlier, you know, about making sure that there's a surety when the sun is not shining or when the wind is not blowing. That's why we make investments in battery technology today. It's amazing how quickly those batteries are getting stronger. And, you know, I'm not like calling out Tesla as the savior of the economy, but they have made some real strides in creating serious battery technology. And there are a number of other companies also who are doing something very similar. So the question is, there are a number of jobs that are a part of the creation of battery technology in a number of forms and fashions. Those are opportunities for folks. Let's go a little bit deeper since you brought me into this and you wanted some real talk. The other thing is we're going to have charging stations all across our country. It's not just the installation of those charging stations. It is the creation of all the parts that go into that. I come out of a family who understands advanced manufacturing and how that used to provide jobs for folks for decades upon decades. So we've got a whole bunch of opportunities around advanced manufacturing, whether we're talking about in the solar field, we're talking about the hundreds and hundreds of parts that go into windmills and then all of the maintenance that they're needed to be in that place. Or if we're talking about a number of other things in green construction, we're talking about energy efficiency. And when we talk about energy efficiency, we're just not talking about making sure that our grandma's house, you know, has the new windows or has some stuff around it. We're talking about buildings all across our country that are going to need to go through that. There are millions of jobs that are out there. And then if you want to get really good with it, then you start moving into the ingenuity and innovation that young people bring around technology and app development, and all these other types of things that are going to be important as we move to a smart grid. And that smart grid will be all across our country. So all of those incredible men and women who played a role in the 2.4 million miles of fossil fuel pipeline that we have, that pipeline that's enough now to go from here to the moon and back, and then back to the moon and back to the earth and on your way back to the moon. If folks can build all of that, they can really play a significant role around the smart grid. And those are just a few of those opportunities that are out there if we're serious about having a much larger conversation, if we're going to make the investments in communities to bring these various types of opportunities that are out there. And lots of times folks forget, you know, I never demonize the folks who work on the oil rigs or who went down inside of those coal mines in very dangerous situations. What I want to see is that we make sure that folks have options. Every time I go and have a set of conversations, and y'all see I got locks and I got brown skin, but I can go into Kentucky or Western Pennsylvania or Ohio or West Virginia and have conversations because I come from those places and because I'm not telling anybody that you have to make this transition. What I'm saying is that you can make similar money. And yeah, we got to get the salaries up a little bit, and you can make sure that your children's future is going to be protected, which is important to everybody, but they also got to put food on the table and keep the lights on at the same time as we're going through this just transition.
That was powerful. Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to come back to you. So listen, as a member of the Energy Committee in Ohio, I once went down to a coal plant, 25,000 feet under the earth, just to see what it was like to walk a mile in a coal miner's shoes. And honestly, I can tell you, I thought the community was like abandoned. There was really nothing there. There was one mom and pop store, there was a Menards, and then there were a couple of other things, but that was it. So you have those people who say, please do not take my job. When I go into the urban community that I represent, I have young people saying to me, we need jobs. So my question is, and I don't know if you, Lonnie, or Harold can take this, if there are so many opportunities available in this green economy, why are so many people unemployed?
Well, I'll start, and then I'll let the gentlemen who have expertise, and I'll be real brief, Harold and Lonnie. We've had folks who've been blocking the movement of any new technology for a long time. I'll speak about West Virginia. You know, when there were a handful of folks who were extremely powerful in the state, and many of them had investments in antiquated energy forms, is the way that I call it out. And they did not want anything else to come in. And when we allow politics to get into or money to get into the politics situation, then you can stop the early investments that are necessary for new things to be able to come into areas. And you experience what I grew up with, where there used to be a mine that was there, that was operating and providing folks opportunity, and they owned the company store. They owned the doctors. They owned a number of other things. And back in the day, they used to have this stuff called scripts. Now, I ain't old enough to have been a part of that, but you know, where you sign your name, the part that you own. And then the other part of it was also that we had industries where if you didn't have a high school degree, you could still make a good living. And that's important. And I honor that, because as was shared, everybody's not trying to go to college. And some folks, because they got to take care of folks, they might not even have a chance to go to high school. So I say all that to say that folks have been blocking opportunities in certain places. I say, let it be competitive. Put people on an even playing field and see which one folks choose.
Would anybody else like to chime in on that one?
I would say it's just simply control. Plantation capitalism. Whoever can control and reap the benefits, and you know it, State Senator, whoever controls, whoever can control that cash flow is where you see those opportunities. And we see that across the board. So the minute this becomes something popular that folks can make money off of, you'll see it open up. And that's always been the way this economy has worked, especially in the South. I mean, we're not fortunate to have Lonnie and the unions here in South Carolina. I mean, we have Longshoreman and Representative Cobb Hunter pushing, but see here where this attitude that, you know, we will take care of our own, that plantation attitude that we have here, they don't allow that, which is why we ended up, as you asked the question, you know, what are we doing in the community? Some of these opportunities we're going out ourselves and leveraging with the colleges and universities and creating those job training opportunities when we see the type of investment coming in, building the homes. When we received the $20 million Hope 6 grant, I saw in the past where that money came into the community and it went right back out. And we see that our folks are not trained. The general contractors, they're not given the opportunities. So we took it upon ourselves and we partnered with the Department of Labor, our technical college, and the Workforce Investment Board, and we created those opportunities for, you know, the construction trade, the brick masonry training, asbestos abatement classes. We took a group of folks from public housing, women, and trained them in the asbestos abatement on that public housing project. And when that was over, the company ended up taking most of the folks with them to the Pentagon to do asbestos abatement work. The others went to Katrina to do the work there. So you can create those opportunities. Just like Lonnie was saying, the linemen, well, we saw the problem here was that folks from our utilities, like Duke Energy, anytime that there's a storm, whether it's in the winter or the summer, those power lines that are down, the reason they can't get the lines and things back restored is because the trees that are down on those lines. And those folks have not been trained. So that opportunity, you know, they've retired out, others have not come in. So we came and created a training class to fill that gap and need. And the real thing is about, you know, the opportunity. When you look at environmental justice, no one wants to talk about, you know, social, economic, or environmental justice. But here, when they saw the economic opportunities, that environmental justice bill passed here, Senator Williams, with no opposition. I mean, it went without reference because they saw the economic impact of providing healthcare to the folks in our community, keeping people out of that emergency room and providing a medical home. You know, once that was done, it expanded, and we have 9 centers now that's providing healthcare services throughout the upstate of South Carolina, even to our agricultural farm workers. So as they stated, yes, the opportunities are there, but sometimes you have to get in there and connect the dots and pull some of those unwilling partners to the table, and you create those successes, then everybody's going to jump on board because they want to share in that revenue.
Well, I'll tell you, Harold, all of what you said is great. But when you want to create these opportunities, the first thing you need is access to capital. So how do individuals, Black and brown communities, get access to capital to transform their own communities? You have a project, the ArcRight project, where you guys have transformed an industrial community into a solar project. But to do all of that, to get the capital that you need, somebody has to give it to you. So where do you go when you're a not-for-profit organization and you want to say, I want to transform this community, this one lot right here, and provide solar energy to 500 homes in my community? The first thing they ask you is for credit. They ask you for bonding. They ask you for collateral. Where do you go if you want to be the engine that transforms your community?
Well, that wasn't something that, you know, you're talking about like a 10-step process, and you're sounding like you're jumping from 1 to 9, 10. It was
how does it happen?
It was a building process with us. And we knew, just like EPA Region 4, there are 8 states. You know, those grants that they give out, there may be 6 or 7 grants. You're talking 8 states, so somebody's going to get left out. And we were able to, you know, develop our community health center. We partnered with Texas Southern University. So what we were looking for in a grant to help us to get to that opportunity, the students from Texas Southern came in. They did the health consultations and the health surveys that got us the data, that got us the top grant award, that started us on that first $650,000, which is now $4.5 million annually now that we receive from HRSA. And so it's kind of like that with, you know, on our healthcare side, it went from, you know, a medically underserved community to an $18 million economic impact. And there was not the folks that were looking to give us anything. We got blocked all the way around on every side. So this is why, too, it's important for communities to be structured in such a way that they can take advantage of a lot of the programs, initiatives, and incentives that are out there. The problem is not only access, but understanding that access, that it's already available and there. You know, we ended up using or partnering with Howard University to help us, because when we got our designation for our federally qualified health center, folks locally here tried to block it and use our FQHC for our public health department. And so we had to go out and partner with Howard University. We found the location and we ended up retrofitting that to get access and get operational before, because we had our 160 days. If you weren't operational, we would have had to go to the health department or return the money. So it's those kinds of things too, that where you're going to have that opposition, and everything that we've actually done, all the initiatives were met with great opposition. Even with our solar farm, we were blocked on the solar farm after having so much support from the Obama administration, Representative Cobb Hunter, and that's where too, using your state representatives, she was able to pull in the president from Duke Energy that actually came in, met with us, found out what we needed to do, and we began to knock those other blocks down. But we got blocked by our local city manager. I mean, everything was there to the table. We had access to the capital. You know, the lender walked around the landfill and in 36 hours gave us a commitment letter, but it was the local city manager who blocked it. But by the organization having its own land and property, now we're partnering with the chemical plant, and we're going to actually build that solar farm, not where it was going to be on the landfill, but we're building it on our property, remove that chemical company, you know, take them that footprint, that carbon footprint away, and be able to provide the folks in the community with a real community impact. Because when people talk about solar, what kind of community impact is the community actually receiving? So where we're removing this carbon footprint, the company itself, they spend about $500,000 a year in their energy bills. So being able to remove that, we're going to put that into a fund and redistribute it by giving the people in the community a rebate for the next 26, 28 years, and still have funds in the, set aside in that fund to do weatherization, rehab, all sorts of things that we can do for those folks within the community. So the opportunity, sometimes you have to create those opportunities, but with the willing administration like we have now with the Build Back Better, from a vice president and a president who's committed. I mean, the one thing about it, we didn't have all these commitments before. And now we have the commitment. Hopefully we can get this Senate to get some resources in and get people like Lonnie and Mustafa to, put that administrator or secretary behind the name and get this stuff distributed. And then get one thing I'll say, State Senator, that we can't do is we can't make the mistake that we made in 2008, because we know that these red state governors are going to block all these resources that are coming in. And so we got to get strategic and understand that as well, to make sure that those resources and that 40% that President-elect Biden is talking about getting into the communities, that it actually gets there. And we don't make that same mistake like was made on the ERA funds.
I don't know if Lonnie wants to add something, but I like dealing with what we know we're gonna have, right? So, President-elect Biden has talked about $2 trillion that's going to be invested in the climate economy, and of course, all that's going to come from that. So when you ask the question, where will folks go? Well, that will be directed in a number of different places. You also have this evolution that's happening. So you have folks like, I'm not calling out companies because I support them or don't support them, but Jeff Bezos just gave $1 billion, to dedicate it to this set of work as well. I mean, I'm sure there will be others that will follow suit. And then we have foundations that are redirecting their resources and their portfolios, that also, when you understand, the success that Harold and others have had, that foundational dollars played somewhat of a role as well, along with a number of other programs that are out there. And then you have to get down to the brass tacks of our financial institutions and what will be the incentives that will be given to them if they are willing to make investments in vulnerable communities, in this set of work that comes through a climate economy. So it's really the coming together of a number of different entities for us to be able to get this foundation built. And out of that foundation is going to come a lot of work of the folks that Lonnie and others work with. And hopefully we'll be able to build an economy that is very circular. Hopefully it's a regenerative economy one day, but let's work on a circular economy right now, where everybody has a chance to actually benefit. So those are just a few of the ways that the financing in the future, which is literally just a few months away, could play out.
Well, listen, let's talk about the Paris Climate Agreement as we talk about this new administration. And I want to say all of what you said is great, because we know that we cannot do anything alone. We have to have partnerships. So we have to work together with all of the organizations and the communities that are out there to make this thing work. So listen, as of 2020, the United States has withdrawn from the Paris Climate Agreements, essentially denying the immediate need for change in policies to reduce climate change and its environmental impacts. How has this influenced or challenged the effectiveness of pursuing or advocating for a green economy? And what do you think is going to happen in the next 50 some odd days to this agreement?
Is that to Harold?
Can I pass it to both of you and Lonnie? Senator, if the United States is the only one trying to reduce its carbon footprint, and it's only a small fraction compared to the rest of the world, that's not going to do anything. And that's why we have to be that leader to be able to pull the global economy together, because the United States alone is not going to solve this problem. This is a global issue.
I see Lonnie want to get some of that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It is. And I think talked about 50 some days, I think shortly after inauguration, I think the new President Biden, I think, is going to be rejoining, the Paris Accord, which we had to be. And that's where, that's where the world leaders are getting together and trying to work together on addressing as Harold said, this is a global issue, and we need to be working in concert with the other countries, and how can we all work together to save this earth? It's for the future generations. And so I think we're going to see that be one of the first things I think that President Biden is going to do, and to send that message to, to everyone else. Hey, it's time to get serious about this. We need to sit down and work together where we can to make sure we're making the right decisions for the future of the whole globe.
Lonnie, are you guys at the table? I don't know if I'm asking for proprietary information, but are you all at the table on this discussion?
Well, I can tell you this, with Vice President Biden, or President-elect, or President Biden, I should say, labor will be at the table. He's made that commitment. When you hear him talk, he's talking about, the strength to build a middle economy, to rebuild the middle class. You got to have union jobs, to help raise that up. And at the height of the labor movement back in the 30s, when we had about 30% unionization across the country, the gap between the worker and the CEO was much narrower than it is today. And it just keeps getting wider and wider and wider. And so, I think that we definitely will have discussions with the administration, the new administration, and how to best provide opportunities to grow labor unions. Right now, polls show that, like 67% of American people that don't belong to a union said they would like to belong to a union if they had a chance. And we've got to continue to go out and educate people on the advantages and how a union can help them, secure, a decent wages and benefits for them and their families. And so, yeah, we will be at the table, and especially when it goes, working on the energy. I think he's going to be, we'll be working right with him and moving forward for the future.
And Mustafa, before you answer that question, I just want to say, Lonnie, that there is a company, probably many companies in my district, who have somehow convinced workers who already make little to no money that getting rid of their union was the best way for them to advance. This was a company, it's a steel company in the community, and they convinced some of the newer workers that if they voted the union out, they would get rid of all the senior members of their senior staff, and then they would get higher salaries. And what ended up happening is they voted the union out, they fired most of the new people, and then they reduced their salary, and they took away a lot of the benefits that the unions brought to the table. So I understand the importance of labor unions, and we have to make sure people of all ages know the benefits of it. So Mustafa, tell me what you think about this Paris Agreement and whether we will be back at the table.
We will most definitely be back at the table. I can't speak for the president-elect, but I'm sure it's going to be one of the early things that he signs, probably within the first few days, because he understands how critically important it is. And, we're one of, I think we may be the only nation now who's not a part of it. There were two at one time, but one of them was having a major war that was going on. So, but that's the basics, right? We often get stuck on just the basics instead of saying, so what more do we need to do? And that's why, the plan that the president or president-elect has helps us to get centered on the work that has to happen, and how we mitigate the impacts that are going on, but also how do we make sure that we are a world leader in the climate economy? Because the reality of the situation is, if we're not the leader in that space, there are other countries that will fill that space. And then they will get the majority of the jobs. They will frame out and have the power for many of these compacts and other things that will be in place about how things flow and what the tariffs looks like and all these other types of things. So we have a chance to be a leader. And that leadership can pay off for the folks who are in our country and can help to protect the planet as a whole. And that's, something that's so critically important, because when we have this conversation about jobs, and I know how important jobs are, we sometimes forget the science. The science is very clear whether we're talking about the IPCC report or the National Climate Assessment Report, the best scientists in the world coming together have told us that we're literally running out of time and we're going to hit a tipping point. And once we hit that tipping point, it will be financially, we'll be unable financially to do the things that are necessary. And we've seen all these other types of climate emergencies that are going on. So it just makes sense for us to do good and do well. We do good by creating the jobs, and we do well by making sure that we are protecting the planet and protecting our communities.
Well, I'm confident that next year when we have this conference, the 2021 NBCSL conference, and hopefully it's not virtual, that we will see the benefits of the good work that all of you have talked about today. I want to thank you, Mustafa, Lonnie, and Harold for joining me today. This is important work, and I could talk to you for hours about what we need to do to make our communities better, but our time has come to an end. So thank you all very much for being with me, and I look forward to seeing you next year to continue this conversation. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Associate Faria.
My father always reminded me good education takes you many different horizons. And that stuck to my mind. So when Dollar a Day came out, I said, why not? Why not just utilize that resource? And Walmart made that path open for me.
Shari.
Without the Dollar a Day program, I definitely don't think I'd be in school right now. Each week for me in school is just an accomplishment. I feel proud every step of the way.
Access to college degrees for $1 a day. Live better. Together. Walmart.
It's best we stay apart for a bit, but that doesn't mean you're in this alone. We're automatically refunding our customers a portion of their personal auto premiums. We're also offering flexible payment options for those who have been financially affected by the crisis. We look forward to returning to something that feels a little closer to life as we knew it. But until then, you can see how we're here to help at libertymutual.com/COVID-19.